Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you are not a gallant knight or a brilliant court advisor. You're not even one of the interesting corpses history bothered to record. You're a forgettable attendant at the Tudor court, a glorified errand boy in a doublet that smells like damp wool and regret. You spend your days emptying chamber pots, bowing at the wrong time, and hoping no one important notices you exist. Which is unfortunate, because now something very important has noticed you, and it's hungry. Before the fever starts and your lymph nodes swell like overripe fruit, do me one small favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love hearing who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these slow, horrible bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, try to relax, let's begin. You've made it to court. Congratulations. You're not royalty, not even nobility, but someone thought you were useful enough to keep around. Maybe you carry trays, maybe you handle laundry, maybe you just smile at the right time and fetch things for people more important than you. Doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're here now, in the beating, reeking heart of Tudor power. You think that means silk and feasts and eloquence. It doesn't. It means you've entered a place where the floors are rarely scrubbed, the beds crawl with mites, and every whispered conversation carries the stench of fear and spoiled wine. This isn't a palace. It's a compost heap with a throne on top. From a distance, Hampton Court, or Whitehall, looks impressive. Turrets, tapestries, carved stone, a real marvel of the age. Step inside, and reality slaps you in the face. Literally, if you get too close to the wrong noble. The smell hits first, a thick, sour cocktail of sweat, tallow, rotting food, and the faint but persistent note of piss. There's no plumbing. Chamber pots slosh. Servants dump waste into the courtyards and hallways with a shrug. And if you slip on it, well, next time, watch where you step, or just fall quietly so you don't disturb the lords. That's more important than your hip. Cleanliness is more performance than practice here. The Queen bathes maybe once a month, and only then with heated debate about whether it's healthy to do so. You, of course, are discouraged from bathing at all. The prevailing wisdom says water can seep into your pores and let disease sneak inside, like a ghost with a grudge. So instead, you dry scrub yourself with linen and hope no one notices the lice. You smell like wet hay and desperation, and so does everyone else. The court calls it musk. You call it unbearable. But you don't say that aloud because you like having a job. And your head. The hierarchy is suffocating. Everyone's watching everyone. Every bow must be deep enough. Every word carefully weighed. A glance held too long can ruin your week. Say the wrong thing in the wrong corridor, and suddenly you're sleeping in the stables, if you're lucky. If not, you'll be hauled off and questioned about your intentions. No one trusts anyone. Rumours spread faster than fire, and most of them end with someone mysteriously dying of natural causes. You start every day wondering if it's your turn. Meals should be a comfort, but they're a trap. The nobles feast on meat, beef, swan, peacock, whatever their gout-ridden hearts desire. You, on the other hand, get gruel if you're lucky, mouldy crusts if you're not. The kitchens are a madhouse of smoke and shouting, the meat half-cooked, and the bread sometimes crawling with weevils. You've learned to eat fast and chew carefully, just in case something wriggles. And no, you don't complain, because hungry is better than flogged. The air is heavy, not just with smell, but with tension. Everything feels fragile, like the entire court is held together by a spider's web of ego and resentment. At night, you sleep lightly, if at all, curled on a mattress stuffed with straw, ears straining for footsteps that might mean you've been summoned, or worse, accused. The candles sputter in their holders, casting twisted shadows across the room. Someone's always coughing. Someone's always crying. Someone's always praying a little too loudly for it to be casual. And then there's the fashion. You thought court life would mean elegance. And yes, the nobles are draped in velvet and gold thread, but underneath it all, their skin festers. Boils, rashes, infected sores, all covered in powder and perfume. You once saw a duke's bandage slip as he bowed. The pus was green. You smiled anyway, because what else are you going to do? Offend him? Please? You'd rather swallow the bile and carry on. You told yourself being here was an honour. You thought you were stepping into history, but all you've really stepped into is a political meat grinder that grins while it chews. The walls are lined with portraits of monarchs and martyrs, and sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. Every hallway echoes with footsteps and fear. Every smile hides a knife. You've traded the mud of the countryside for the polished rot of the capital. And already, deep in your bones, something knows this place will be the end of you. You've only been here a few weeks and already you're used to the sounds of illness. A cough here, a hacking fit there, someone vomiting quietly into a corner behind a tapestry. You don't think much of it. Everyone's always sick. It's the background music of Tudor life. Phlegm, groans, wheezing breath, like some cursed symphony composed entirely of human failure. It doesn't help that half the court believes sickness is caused by miasmas or evil vapours or an imbalance in their bodily humours. You've overheard noblemen earnestly debating whether sneezing too much means you have too much wind in your spleen. No one knows what they're talking about, but they speak with confidence, and that's apparently all that's required here. The palace is a maze of damp stone and wood warped by time. There's no such thing as fresh air. Windows are small and rarely opened. Drafts are feared like demons. So instead of ventilation, you get thick, wet closeness. It clings to your clothes and soaks into your lungs. The walls sweat. Mould blossoms in the corners of every chamber, sometimes forming strange little colonies behind tapestries or under rush mats. You once found something growing on a spoon. You scraped it off and used the spoon anyway. That's the level of dignity you operate with now. You start noticing that the same people are always ill. The steward who oversees linens has a cough that never stops. The woman who prepares the queen's sweetmeats started walking with a limp 3 days ago and now smells faintly of iron and rot. Someone collapses during morning prayers and is dragged away without ceremony. They're said to be resting. You learn quickly that resting is a euphemism, and most people who rest don't return. But no one discusses it. The court is built on the polite illusion that everything is fine. Pointing out the obvious is considered rude. Bleeding from your gums is apparently just a seasonal affliction. There's no quarantine, no protocols. The sick and the healthy all rub elbows, drink from the same pitchers, handle the same trays. Servants sleep 5 to a room. You eat whatever's handed to you, touched by who knows how many fingers before reaching your mouth. One cook handles both raw meat and baked pastries without so much as wiping his hands. You try not to think about it. The less you think, the easier it is to chew. You've learned that denial is the most important tool in a Tudor servant's emotional survival kit. No one washes their hands unless someone important is watching. Even then, it's more symbolic than effective. A quick splash with cold water, maybe rubbed with a linen rag that's dirtier than the fingers it was meant to clean. Soap is expensive and rarely used. Water is suspect. Disease, if acknowledged at all, is blamed on the stars or bad luck or foreignness. The French pox, they call it, the sweating sickness, the bloody flux. They name the symptoms like omens, never admitting that what's killing them might be living right under their own fingernails. You hear whispers that something is spreading. No one says the word plague, not yet, but the tension in the air thickens like bad pudding. A page boy collapses in the hallway, and the guards poke at him with a stick before dragging him out by the heels. You see streaks on the floor that look suspiciously like blood, though they're wiped up before anyone can ask questions. The Queen's physician starts locking the door to his chambers. The apothecary keeps mixing new tinctures, muttering to himself about unbalanced bile. Everyone's pretending very hard that nothing is happening. It's almost convincing, until someone dies in front of you. You're in the kitchens when it happens. A scullery maid, maybe 15, slumps forward while peeling turnips. No drama, no screaming. She just goes limp, like someone blew out the candle behind her eyes. When they roll her over, her lips are purple and her skin has started to blotch. The cook tells you not to touch her and goes back to chopping onions. You stand there frozen until someone shouts at you to keep working. That's the moment you realise something's wrong. Not because she died, but because no one seems surprised. You lie awake that night, listening to the walls breathe. You hear coughing in the next room. Someone is praying quietly. Someone else is weeping into their blanket. You stare at the ceiling, wondering if your skin feels hot or if you're imagining it. You try to remember if your throat always felt this sore. There's a heaviness in your chest that might be dread, or might be the start of something worse. You pull the blanket tighter and tell yourself it's probably just the cold, or the dust, or your imagination. But in the pit of your stomach, something begins to churn. Not panic, not yet. Just the quiet, slow realization that something has already gone wrong. And it's not leaving, it's breathing with you. You've yet to actually see a rat scurry across your bed, but you know they're there. You hear them in the walls at night, tiny claws scraping along the timber, little squeaks echoing in the dark. Sometimes, if you leave a crust of bread out, it's gone by morning, and not in the way that means you ate it. They don't announce themselves. They don't need to. This is their palace, not yours. You're just borrowing it, the same way your body is slowly borrowing the illnesses they've been kind enough to carry in. The rats are the real aristocracy here, well-fed, unbothered, and impossible to remove. You think about sleeping in shifts, staying alert, maybe trying to set a trap, but what would you do if you caught one? Eat it. That's not entirely a joke. You know someone who did, claimed it tasted like greasy goose. He died a week later. Though that might have been unrelated, everything is possibly unrelated, which is the beautiful thing about Tudor medicine. The logic is fluid. If you bleed from your nose, it's because Venus is in retrograde. If your skin peels off, you've angered your liver. You make jokes about it, bitter, desperate little jabs about the humour imbalance in your spleen, but you're not actually joking. You have no idea what's killing people, and neither does anyone else. Meanwhile, the itching never stops. It begins at your ankles where the rush mat ends, and creeps steadily upward. You scratch in your sleep. You scratch while serving drinks. You scratch until your skin flakes under your fingernails, and still the biting continues. Fleas are everywhere, hopping from sleeve to sleeve, like they're making social calls. Lice hide in the seams of your collar. Ticks burrow into the warm, damp parts of you that you try not to think about. You've started pinching your clothes before dressing, hoping to crush whatever horrors are lying in wait. You never get them all. The bedding is worse. You sleep on straw stuffed into linen, changed only when someone dies on it. The sheets are damp and cold, and they smell like breath. No one has ever washed them, not properly. You'd be better off sleeping outside, but that would be seen as suspicious, like you're trying to avoid something. So instead, you lie there each night, marinating in your own filth, scratching until you bleed. You keep telling yourself the bite on your leg is just a gnat, a scratch, a blister from walking too far in tight hose. You avoid looking at it too closely. It's easier that way. One of the older valets tells you to smear vinegar behind your ears. Keeps the vermin away, he says, with a gap-toothed grin and a boil on his cheek that looks ready to burst. You try it. It doesn't help. The vinegar just adds another stench to the daily cocktail of human rot and sour breath. But now you smell like you're trying, and trying is what matters. Trying tells others that you care, that you're clean, that you aren't the one bringing death into the court. That's important because once the finger-pointing begins, no one wants to be the source. You begin to notice other people scratching too. the red marks on their wrists, the way they wince when adjusting their sleeves. You start counting scabs like they're tally marks, tracking how long someone has left. You laugh with the others when someone mentions the bad air, but part of you wonders if there's something worse in the bites, something small, invisible, and angry. Of course, you don't have the vocabulary for bacteria or pathogens, but you have intuition, and your intuition is screaming. There are rumours now that someone in the lower kitchens died after their skin turned black, that a page boy was found with egg-sized swellings in his armpits, that a noblewoman's maid collapsed mid-curtsy and coughed blood across the Queen's floor tiles. You haven't seen any of this firsthand, but the fear is real. You carry it in your spine like a second skeleton. You try not to touch anyone unless you have to. You start sleeping in your day clothes. You avoid shared mugs. None of it will help. You just don't know that yet. Still, you blame the stars, Mercury in retrograde, a curse from the Welsh, an imbalance in your melancholy, anything but what's right in front of you. You sit on your flea-bitten cot, scratching at a scab that wasn't there yesterday, and pray to a god that hasn't answered anyone lately. You tell yourself it's not that bad. You'll be fine. You're healthy, lucky, not the sort to get sick, but the truth is curled up under your blanket. It's in your seams. It's waiting in your mattress, quiet and hungry, and it never sleeps. It begins, as these things always seem to, with something ordinary. Just a cough, a dry, scratchy tickle at the back of your throat. You clear it once, then again. It doesn't go away. You convince yourself it's the straw in your bedding, or maybe the candle smoke you walked through earlier. Maybe someone was cooking something spiced, and it irritated your lungs. There are 100 little excuses, and you rotate through them all, hoping one will feel right. You tell no one, of course. You don't want to draw attention. A cough is embarrassing, weak, and weakness is dangerous here. By the next morning, your chest feels tight, like someone's tied a rope around your ribs and pulled it snug. Your breath comes slower, heavier. You try not to think about it. You keep working. You smile when spoken to. You lift trays and fetch water and repeat your duties like a ghost walking its usual route. No one notices anything's off, or if they do, they pretend not to. Everyone's pretending all the time. That's the first law of court life. Silence keeps you safe. But your limbs ache now, dull and deep. Like the bones inside you have started to rot in place. You try to stretch it out. You tell yourself, it's the weather. It isn't. The fever arrives soon after. It doesn't announce itself with a sudden blaze, but creeps in like a thief. Quiet, gradual, greedy. 1 hour you're cold and clammy, teeth chattering as you pour wine. The next you're burning, your skin flushed and slick with sweat, as if you've been caught in the kitchens. You wipe your forehead and your sleeve comes away wet. Still, you say nothing. You don't dare. You've seen what happens to those who admit they're unwell. They disappear, locked in side rooms, isolated behind drawn curtains, taken away under the excuse of rest or precaution. None of them come back. Then the boils begin. Small at first, a lump behind your ear, a swelling on your inner thigh. You try not to touch them, but they itch and burn, and your fingers betray you. The skin is hot, tender, stretched tight like fruit about to split. When you press too hard, they weep. The liquid is thick, yellow, and smells like something that should be buried. You bandage them as best you can, but the wrappings stick. When you peel one off, a patch of skin comes with it. You feel sick. You are sick. But by now, admitting it is as dangerous as the illness itself. Someone suggests you visit the barber surgeon. You laugh, or try to. It comes out as a rasping wheeze. But you go because what else can you do? The barber's room smells of iron and mould. He doesn't look at you so much as glance in your direction, poking at your swelling with a gloved thumb before declaring it, probably, the sweating sickness. Probably. That word does a lot of heavy lifting. He prescribes a poultice of vinegar and rose water along with generous bleeding. You let him do it, of course. You have no choice. You're not a person to him, just another limb to drain, another face to forget. After the bloodletting, your vision swims and your knees barely hold. You crawl back to your quarters and collapse onto your cot, shivering. You try to sleep, but it's a fever dream sleep, tangled and heavy, with flashes of noise and heat, and the sensation of drowning in your own lungs. You wake soaked in sweat. Your mouth so dry it hurts to open. Your tongue feels thick. Your lips are cracked. You try to stand and nearly fall. You crawl to a basin, spit blood into the water, and tell yourself it's nothing. You're still pretending. You're too deep in to stop now. More symptoms arrive, each one crueler than the last. Your armpits begin to swell. Not just sore now, but massive tender knots that throb with every movement. You've started bleeding from your nose and gums. Your urine smells like meat left in the sun. Your breath comes shallow and sharp, as if each inhaled is made of splinters. You try to eat, but your stomach turns. The only thing you can keep down is water, and even that fights back. When someone passes you in the hall, they flinch. You know what they're thinking. They're already forgetting your name. By the time you realise this isn't the sweating sickness, it's already too late. This is something worse, something with a name that no one says out loud, but everyone fears. You hear it whispered in the corners. Plague. No one wants to believe it. That word carries weight. It isn't just a disease. It's a sentence, a punishment, a story with one ending. You lie on your side, drenched in fever, listening to your own breathing, like it's the ticking of a clock winding down. You tell yourself you'll get better, but you know you're lying. The plague doesn't knock. It lets itself in, and it's already made itself at home. No one really understands how disease spreads, but that doesn't stop anyone from pretending they do. Every noble, friar, and half-literate barber has an opinion, and none of them agree. The court swings between denial and hysteria with the grace of a drunken noble at a joust. One day, people are coughing blood and collapsing in hallways, and it's treated like an unfortunate coincidence. The next, someone sneezes during a mealtime blessing, and the entire room empties like rats from a burning barn. There's no system. There's no science. Just superstition and desperation, each feeding off the other. Someone declares that quarantine is necessary. That word, of course, does not mean what it means now. It's not organised. It's not safe. It's not helpful. It's a panic response, not a plan. The order comes down from someone vaguely important, probably a noble who's already packed up and left, and suddenly doors are being nailed shut with people still inside. Families, servants, children. No one asks if you're sick. No one checks. If you lived in the wrong corridor or made the mistake of coughing at the wrong moment, you're sealed in. The Red Cross is painted on your door, thick and crude, like a brand. Beneath it, someone scrawls, "Lord have mercy." They don't mean it. It's a formality. You're not officially told you've been quarantined. You figure it out when your usual door won't open. The nail heads gleam in the candlelight, freshly hammered into the frame. You rattle it a few times, as if that might change things, but it holds. You check the others, also barred. There's no ceremony, no explanation. Just the sudden awareness that the outside world has decided you're already dead, and doesn't want to deal with the cleanup. There's no food left, no firewood, no medical supplies. You are contained in the same way a fire is contained, by surrounding it with dry timber and then walking away. The room you share is small, meant for storage or overflow staff. It holds 4 people, plus one who died last night and hasn't stopped smelling since. There's no proper window, just a narrow slit for air that does nothing to clear the stench. You try to ignore the body, but it's difficult. It slumps in the corner like a forgotten pile of laundry, limbs twisted awkwardly, jaw slightly open, as if mid-sentence. No one wants to move it. If you touch the dead, you might join them. But leaving it there feels worse. You take turns looking away, as if taking breaks from guilt. The others are in various states of denial. One insists she's just tired. Another claims it's not plague, it's a chill in the blood. You say nothing. You're past hoping. Your body aches in strange places. Your skin burns and sweats and cools again in waves. You feel like you're rotting from the inside out. Your thoughts sticking together like damp parchment. You can't tell if you're delirious or just exhausted. Sometimes you dream of being outside, breathing clean air. Sometimes you dream of coughing up your lungs. Waking up is worse than either. No physician comes, no priest visits. The doors are nailed shut, and that is the extent of your care. Occasionally, someone slides a small loaf of bread through a broken panel in the door. Once there's a mug of watered ale. They do not speak. They do not look at you. You're not a person anymore. You're a source of danger, a reminder of everything fragile about this carefully staged kingdom. If the court acknowledges your suffering, it would have to acknowledge its own mortality. And that's unacceptable. Time blurs. You don't know how many days pass. You sleep when you can, drift when you can't. The fever comes in waves, but now you're too weak to fear it. You've stopped tending the boils. They've split on their own. Your sheets are stained. Your skin peels. The others cough, wheeze, beg for water. One of them dies in the night. You don't know which one until morning. You consider checking for a pulse, but then again, what's the point? You can hear the flies buzzing before you even roll over. Eventually, the door creaks. Not open, just a shift. Someone's checking. Maybe they'll let you out. Maybe they're just seeing if everyone inside is dead yet. You crawl toward the sound, dragging yourself across the sticky floor, and whisper something that was supposed to be help. It comes out as a rasp, thin and hollow. The eye on the other side of the slit doesn't blink. Then the door creaks closed again. Nails hammer down. They don't want survivors. Survivors ask questions. Survivors cost resources. It's easier if you just die quietly. And so you wait. You share your air with corpses, your thoughts with silence. This is quarantine, Tudor style, not for healing, not for safety, but for containment in the most cowardly sense. You're not being protected. You're being buried in slow motion. Eventually, someone remembers that you're sick and not entirely dead, which means you're now eligible for treatment. Treatments, of course, being a generous word for whatever combination of folklore and guesswork the local apothecary has decided to inflict on you this week. He arrives smelling of sour herbs and crushed hope. A man so confident in his own nonsense that you start to believe he might accidentally help you. Just by sheer force of conviction. He doesn't examine you. He just glances at your swollen lymph nodes, your blistered lips, and your sweat-stained bedding before nodding like he's seen this 1,000 times before. Maybe he has, but based on the results it hasn't helped. He gives you a small pouch of something he calls essence of dried toad. You ask what it does and he launches into a long wheezing explanation about how toad carries earthy vapours that draw sickness downward, away from the heart. You don't understand what that means, neither does he, but he tells you to sprinkle it into hot water, inhale the steam, and rub the leftovers into your chest. The powder smells like mildew and old socks. You do it anyway. You have nothing left to lose but bodily fluids. The next day your boils are worse, your throat is raw and your breath rattles like broken glass. You tell the apothecary, it's not working. He nods sagely and says, it means the sickness is beginning to resist, which apparently is a good thing. He offers powdered unicorn horn as a follow-up, which you know is actually ground up stag antler, but calling it unicorn makes it more expensive. You're not even offended. At this point, the lie is comforting. You stir it into a barley drink and try to keep it down. You don't. It comes up minutes later, along with most of what was left in your stomach. The apothecary says that's proof it's working. Everything's a good sign as long as you don't die right in front of him. When those fail, the real fun begins. Purging. They give you things to eat that aren't really food. Bitter roots, raw onions soaked in vinegar, crushed garlic mixed with spoiled milk. The theory is that the body is full of toxins and humours, and the only way to fight disease is to eject as much filth from every orifice as possible. You vomit, you sweat, you weep uncontrollably at one point, though it's unclear if that's from the herbs or just emotional collapse. Your chamber pot becomes your closest companion. Every time you think you've reached the end of your body's contents, your stomach surprises you. The purge never ends, only your strength does. The barber surgeon returns to take his share of your blood. He doesn't ask how you're feeling. He just brings the same rusty blade he uses for everyone else, swipes it across your arm, and lets the blood drip into a bowl that smells like pennies and mould. He assures you the colour means you have an excess of black bile. You'd argue, but you're too dizzy to form complete sentences. Afterward, they give you wine and bread to restore your balance. You can't taste the wine. The bread crumbles like ash on your tongue. Other specialists come and go. A man in a bird mask waves a ball of burning rosemary in your face while chanting something in Latin that sounds more like a legal complaint than a prayer. A friar insists you swallow a relic, a shard of wood said to be from the true cross, though it looks suspiciously like firewood. One of the Queen's mystics offers a pouch of blessed salt and tells you to hang it over your bed while reciting the Lord's Prayer backward. At this point, you're willing to try anything. You chew the wood, you wear the salt, you chant in whispers until your throat bleeds. Nothing changes. You're surrounded by certainty. Everyone is so confident that their method will work, that their concoction will heal you, that their superstition will succeed where others failed. But none of them stay long. None of them linger. They leave you reeking of garlic, leaking from multiple orifices, and somehow more exhausted than before. None of them have actually survived a plague, of course. They've just watched people die in more creative ways than you've had the energy to imagine. Still, they continue, because admitting they don't know what they're doing would collapse the entire illusion. The illusion that anyone is in control. Eventually, they stop coming. Whether it's because you've grown too quiet or too smelly, you're not sure. They leave behind their powders, their poultices, their false assurances. You're left to rot in a pile of damp rags and spent prayers. The herbs have turned to mush. The tinctures have gone sour. The relics are chewed. The salt has fallen to the floor and been kicked into the corners. You lie there, bloated with failure, wondering if maybe you just weren't pious enough, or perhaps the toad wasn't fresh. You'll never know. That's the magic of Tudor medicine. When it doesn't work, it's always your fault. You don't remember the worst of it. Only flashes, the sweating, the heaving, the stench of your own skin sloughing off. You remember the pressure in your armpits, like hot stones packed under your flesh, and the way your jaw locked when the fever peaked. You don't know how long you lay in that bed. Days, maybe a week. You half expected to die. In fact, you hoped to by the end. But death, in its usual contrariness, passed you over. When the fever finally broke, you didn't feel relief. You felt nothing. Just wet sheets, stiff limbs, and the sour taste of old breath in your mouth. You'd survived, and you had no idea what to do with that. They let you out 2 days after your fever broke, or more accurately, they unbarred the door, slid in a fresh set of linens, and left without a word. No one checked to see if you were still contagious. No one offered help. You pulled yourself up from the floor, shaking and half naked, and crawled out on hands and knees like something born wrong. The hallway was quiet. Everyone who'd screamed through the walls was gone. Whether they recovered or rotted, you never found out. You're not well. Not really. You shuffle more than walk now. Your muscles feel like waterlogged rope. Every joint clicks when you move, and the smallest chore makes you dizzy. You've lost weight too, not in a flattering way. You're all elbows and shadows, a scarecrow in a servant's uniform, but you're vertical, which is apparently enough to be useful again. There's no official recognition of your survival. No congratulations, no promotion. Just someone shoving a mop back into your hands and telling you to clean the hallway where another one died. You nod, you clean, because the alternative is lying back down and waiting to be mistaken for a corpse. It was only a matter of time. The outer halls were already ruined, the kitchens, the servant quarters, the common areas. But for a while, the royal chambers stood untouched. There were guards at the doors, perfumed cloths over their faces, and orders to keep the filth out. They burned herbs in the thresholds and blessed the air with holy water. The nobles stayed cloistered, convinced that status alone was a barrier to disease, as though plague cared about lineage, as though boils checked birth records. It was almost funny, in a cruel, inevitable way, watching them pretend their titles made them immune. The first breach came quietly. A chambermaid, pale and trembling, collapsed while fluffing pillows in one of the Queen's antechambers. She didn't scream. She just dropped the tray, coughed once, and sat down like her knees had turned to paper. They dragged her out by the wrists, trying not to touch skin, muttering about exhaustion and fainting spells. But you saw the marks under her arms. You saw the blood in her spit. You didn't say anything because what would it change? The damage was already done. She had touched the drapes, the silver, the doorknobs, the Queen's comb. After that, it spread fast. The Queen's physician was the next to fall, the one who swore he could tell the difference between a common cough and contagion. You heard that he began shaking in the middle of a consultation, foam flecking his lips, blood dripping from his nose. He was taken to a side chamber, and no one's seen him since. His assistant tried to take over, but within a day was coughing into his sleeves and mixing the wrong tinctures. A nobleman threw a chalice at his head when he misdiagnosed a boil as mosquito irritation. No one even bothered punishing him for it. The nobles began showing symptoms next. First, the lesser ones, the ones who had still been taking meals with the staff, still trusting that their handkerchiefs and scented oils would keep them safe. Then the ladies, one by one, they vanished from the corridors. A few tried to hide their illness, smearing powder over blisters and perfuming their hair until the stench of rot broke through anyway. One of them passed you in the corridor, smiling tightly. You could see the swelling behind her ear, just above her collar. She knew you saw it. You both kept walking. It wasn't long before there were no clean spaces left. The guest suites were occupied by the dying. The royal bedchambers stank of vinegar and sweat. They tried posting guards, but who would volunteer? Who would stay in the room after the second hour, when the patient began screaming about fire under their skin? You passed a chamber, where 3 servants stood outside the door, listening as someone inside begged for a priest. No one went in. Eventually, the voice stopped. You were assigned to latrine duty, an ironic kind of punishment, if there were anyone left to enjoy the joke. You spent your hours wiping down royal chamber pots, with rags that were already grey with use, emptying them into buckets that sloshed when you walked. You told yourself it was honest work. At least it gave you something to do. At least it kept you away from the deathbeds, most of the time. But the chamber pots were heavier now, and bloodier. You began to dread what colour you'd find each time you lifted the lid. The Queen herself was still alive. Supposedly, no one saw her anymore, not even the higher-ranked servants. Her rooms were locked from the inside, and her remaining ladies communicated only through notes passed under the door. A tray of food would be left outside, and later returned mostly untouched. You heard someone say she was praying constantly. You heard someone else say she was hallucinating. You didn't believe either, because belief required energy. All you knew was that the door hadn't opened in days, and the hallway outside it now smelled like old meat and wine gone bad. There were no safe corridors. The infection moved like smoke, invisible, choking, inescapable. You'd turn a corner and hear someone coughing before you could retreat. You'd open a door and find a trail of vomit across the tiles, leading somewhere you didn't want to follow. You tried to avoid the worst areas, but the worst areas kept expanding. You marked them in your head like dead zones, adjusting your routes to dodge them, but soon there were too many. The entire court was becoming one giant sealed room, a body bloated and rotting from within. You still tried to work, still wiped surfaces, still carried out waste and folded linens, but you did it with the reflexes of someone being hunted. You flinched at every sound, every cough. Your skin crawled every time your fingers brushed metal or fabric that wasn't your own. You scratched constantly. You stopped breathing through your nose. You started having nightmares about the Queen. Not as a woman, but as a figure behind a locked door, bones draped in silk, eyes wide and glowing in the dark. By then, no one was pretending anymore. There were no more masks, no more ceremonies. The disease had reached the throne room. It had curled its fingers around the edges of power. And you were still here, wiping chamber pots with shaking hands, praying your skin wouldn't split next. It starts with whispers, not about illness this time, but escape. After weeks of pretending their bloodlines could repel disease, the nobles are finally packing up and leaving. Not all at once, of course. That would require coordination, and coordination died around the same time the Queen's physician started foaming at the mouth. But one by one, they disappear. A carriage rolls out at dusk. A chamber is found stripped of linens by dawn. Silverware vanishes. Footsteps echo in corridors that used to be crowded with perfume and politics. There's no announcement, just absence. You'd think they'd go quietly, ashamed to abandon the court they once ruled. They don't. They go with urgency. Yes, with fear clenching their jaws and sweat on their palms. But not shame. They still think they deserve better than this. That their manors and countryside villas will shield them where the palace could not. You overhear one lady whisper that she'd rather die in her orchard than among the common filth. You resist the urge to ask if she means the disease or the people who emptied her chamber pot for the last 6 years. The Queen's inner circle is gone now, dead, fled, or locked away somewhere too deep to matter. Rumour says she was moved in the night, carried from her sickbed on a litter, veiled and silent. Others say she died 3 days ago, and they're keeping it secret to prevent a stampede. It doesn't really matter. Either way, the throne is empty. Power has retreated into the hills, and you, naturally, are still here. You tell yourself it's because you're loyal. That staying means something, that this place, as hollowed out as it's become, still holds value. But the truth is simpler. You weren't invited to leave. No one summoned you to pack a bag. No one left space in the carriage. You are not part of any noble household. You are not anyone's concern. You remain for the same reason the rats do, because there was no effort to remove you. Those who stay are the ones without options. Servants too lowly to be missed, guards too sick to stand, priests who still think prayers can purify the air. You recognize most of them by face, but not by name. That's how anonymity works here. You're all cogs in a machine that's no longer turning. Some of them still try to do their jobs. A laundress hangs linens on a line, even though the fabric smells like blood. A scribe copies proclamations no one will read. You sweep. Not because it matters, but because the motion keeps your mind from unravelling. It's eerie, watching the court collapse without ceremony. There are no final speeches, no locked gates, no last man out to extinguish the candles. The palace simply empties like a lung. You pass a drawing room and see sunlight on the furniture. Everything's still in place. Cushions fluffed, wine glasses half full. You can almost believe they're coming back, but you know better. If they return at all, it'll be with masks and servants who weren't here to smell the rot. You should leave too. You tell yourself that sometimes. If you had any sense, you'd be gone already, walking south maybe, toward one of the towns, not yet choked by plague smoke. But your legs are weak. Your chest still aches when you breathe too deep. And part of you doesn't trust the world outside these walls to be any kinder than the one inside. At least here, the enemy is known. Tangible, wearing a familiar face. And besides, the doors are so heavy now, you're not sure you have the strength to open them. You begin to measure time not in days, but in silences. The last time you heard laughter. The last time someone whistled. the last time you heard footsteps other than your own. Each quiet moment stretches longer than the one before it. The court is a body in its final hours, twitching, murmuring, waiting for someone to declare it dead. You've started to think that you're not in a palace anymore. You're in a mausoleum that forgot to finish dying, and yet you still move, still carry, still sweep. It's not duty anymore, it's momentum. You survived the sickness. You survived the screaming, the dying, the smell of velvet gowns soaked in bile. You stayed. And what has that loyalty earned you? Silence. Solitude. A front row seat to the end of everything you once believed was untouchable. No one's coming back. No one's writing your name in the history books. You are the leftover, the afterthought, the living proof that even the grandest courts rot from the inside out. And still you sweep, as if clearing dust could bring the world back. It doesn't happen all at once, the hunger. At first, it's just smaller portions. A bowl that's only half full, a tray that comes back mostly empty. You assume the cook is ill, or lazy, or simply stretched too thin. There's no official announcement. No one bothers to tell the servants what's going on. You just start noticing that the bread is harder than usual. The stew is thinner. The porridge has a film on top that doesn't stir away. You keep eating it anyway, because that's what's there. And because you remember what it felt like to be too sick to swallow. And you'd rather not return to that particular corner of misery just yet. Then the trays stop altogether. No one brings the midday meal. You wait, stomach twisting itself into knots, until someone finally checks the kitchens. They're empty. Not just of people, but of life. The hearth is cold, the pots are crusted over. There's a single shoe abandoned near the doorway, like someone meant to come back for it, and didn't. A half-carved joint of meat has started to sweat on the butcher's block, flies blooming across the surface like rot in motion. You stare at it, momentarily tempted, until the smell catches you full in the face. Whatever it once was, it isn't food anymore. The next morning you try to take matters into your own hands. You and two others, a boy with a limp and a girl who used to polish pewter, go down to the storerooms. You expect to find supplies, barrels of grain, sacks of onions, wheels of cheese coated in wax. Instead, you find mould. Everything damp has turned to sludge. The flour has gone sour, and the potatoes have gone soft and sprouted grotesque white fingers that seem to reach toward you. A sack of apples collapses under your hand, a wet, slumping mess that smells like sweet wine and stomach acid. You take what you can, which isn't much. A stale heel of bread, a shriveled carrot. You don't talk while you work. There's nothing to say. Water is worse. The pumps haven't worked properly in days. What you manage to draw is cloudy, with a greasy sheen that never settles. You boil it when you can, though firewood is nearly gone. Most nights, you drink it as is, choking it down between clenched teeth, and telling yourself that at least it's wet. You've taken to calling it black water. It's a joke, but only just. A few people have started vomiting after drinking it. Others stopped drinking entirely. You're not sure which is more dangerous. Soon enough, the weakest begin to fade. A girl collapses while carrying linens and doesn't get up. An older man, one of the stewards, simply lies down in a storage room and doesn't come out. They aren't buried. There's no time. Their bodies stay where they fell, unless someone trips over them. And even then there's a moment of hesitation, not out of fear but calculation. Could anything they were carrying still be useful? You start taking food from the dead. It begins small, a crust in someone's pocket. A half-eaten roll on a tray dropped beside a body. Then you begin actively searching. You pry open bags. You check cupboards in rooms that smell like decay. One night, you find a nearly full jar of honey under someone's cot. You don't think about how they got it, or why they didn't eat it. You just dip your fingers in and devour it like an animal. You don't tell anyone. The next day, the jar is gone, and you pretend it never existed. No one notices what you're doing. They're too busy with their own unravelling. The few people still moving speak only when necessary. Eye contact is rare. You hear more coughing than conversation. Someone's been muttering a prayer in the hallway for the last 3 days. The same one, over and over, voice cracked and slurred with thirst. You're not sure if they know they're saying it anymore. You're not even sure they're alive. You haven't gone to check. You begin to ration your hoard. A bite of bread in the morning, a swallow of water at dusk. You dream of apples, of roast meat and dripping fat and soft cheese on warm bread. In your dreams, you eat until your stomach bursts. You wake up to the taste of mildew and bile. You lick condensation from the window glass. You chew on the inside of your cheek when the hunger gets too loud. You've started counting the seconds between hunger pangs like it's a game. You always lose. By the end of the week, you've stopped expecting meals. You've stopped hoping for help. The pantry is a mausoleum. The kitchen is a tomb. You no longer think of food as a right, just a memory, a luxury for the living. You keep moving, keep scavenging, because hunger is stronger than fear now. Hunger is the only thing left that reminds you you're still human. And you're not even sure you want to be. The dead are everywhere now. At first they were carefully removed, wrapped in linen, carried out by gloved hands, buried at night under whispered prayers. That didn't last. There are too many now, and not enough hands to carry them. No one volunteers, no one offers. The strong are too sick, and the sick are too afraid. So the bodies stay where they fall, in hallways, in storerooms, curled up beneath stairwells. Some are propped against walls like discarded furniture. Others are hidden behind doors that no one opens anymore. You don't go looking for them, but you find them anyway. You can't walk 5 steps without the smell reminding you who was here before you. The linen runs out quickly. Shrouds give way to tablecloths, to bed sheets, to nothing at all. You stop covering the faces after a while. It doesn't make a difference. The eyes still stare, cloudy and sunken, like they're waiting for someone to apologize. The mouths hang open, in stiff final expressions, surprise, pain, disbelief. They gape at you from corners and corridors, silent accusations, in every wrinkle of dead skin. You try not to meet their gaze, but you do. Of course you do. Some of them you knew. There's a maid slumped by the main staircase. You remember her laugh. Too loud for court, but honest. You'd spoken once, maybe twice. She told you she liked your hands. Now one of hers is frozen mid-reach, stretched toward the banister, like she almost caught herself before the end came. There's a steward face down in the chapel, the one who once lent you a spoon when yours went missing. You almost don't recognize him. His skin has turned the colour of rotting figs and something black leaks from his nose. You want to say something. Thank you, maybe, but your throat closes instead, and you walk away. Outside, they've dug pits. At least that's the rumour. Mass graves somewhere beyond the walls, in the fields where no one wants to go anymore. But getting bodies there is easier said than done. The carts are full. The men who drove them are dead or gone. The pits themselves, they say, have started to fill. Not just with corpses, but with animals, rainwater, rot. The graveyard is a swamp now, churned mud and bone. And still the bodies keep coming. Some start to swell and split before they ever leave the palace. The flies are a constant now, buzzing in your ears, crawling across your face when you sleep. They come in through the cracks, the broken panes, the doors that no one closes anymore. They gather in clusters, thick and black, feeding on the eyes and mouths of the dead. You wave them away at first, then you stop. They always come back. You've learned to let them have what they want. There's enough to go around. The living have started to ignore the dead entirely. You step over bodies the way you once stepped around nobles, carefully, quietly, and with your eyes on the floor. No one wants to admit how quickly it became normal, how easy it was to adapt. You eat next to them, sleep in rooms they died in. You've even taken clothing from a corpse, just once, just a belt. But the shame stuck with you longer than the leather did. You scrubbed your hands raw afterward, though you know it made no difference. There's talk of burning them, the desperate kind of talk, whispered between survivors who haven't eaten in days and still smell smoke that isn't there. Someone even tried once, dragged 3 bodies into the courtyard, piled wood beneath them, struck a flint with shaking hands. But the wood was too wet and the bodies too far gone. They smouldered more than burned. The stench rolled through the halls for 2 days, thick and oily, coating your tongue in the taste of spoiled meat and old blood. No one tried again after that. Sometimes, in the quieter moments, you wonder how many bodies it would take before the palace stops echoing. If the dead could fill the halls so completely that the building itself would choke and fall silent. You think about the weight of them, the sheer number. How many have fallen? How many are still waiting to fall? You count sometimes, not out loud, just in your head. 1 near the chapel, 2 in the pantry, 3 under the stairs. You lose track after 10. Not because you forget, but because they keep moving in your mind, overlapping, blurring together. You don't feel fear anymore, or sadness. What you feel is fatigue, the kind that settles deep in your marrow, making every step feel like betrayal. You're tired of death, tired of looking at it, tired of smelling it, tired of pretending you don't care. But you do. You care too much. That's the problem. You care enough to remember their names, their faces, the last thing they said. And that's what haunts you more than anything. Not the dead, the remembering. You think you'll adjust, that at some point your nose will stop noticing it. The way a miller stops smelling flour, or a tanner no longer flinches at boiling hides. But it never happens. The stink doesn't fade. If anything, it sharpens, seeps deeper, evolves. It's not just the scent of death anymore. It's the scent of everything that came before it. The unwashed bodies, the soured food, the stagnant water. The rot isn't just around you now. It's on you. It's in you. No matter where you go, you bring it with you like a second skin. You try to clean yourself. Once, you find a cracked basin and pour water into it, the kind that's more murk than liquid. You scrub your arms until they sting. You scrape your nails against your scalp. You shake out your clothes and hang them near a candle, as if the smoke might do something. But when you lie back down, it's still there. The clinging, cloying scent of filth that's been cooked into the fabric of your existence. It's in your mouth when you breathe. It coats the back of your throat like spoiled milk. You wake gagging more often than not. Other people notice it too, though no one says anything anymore. There's a collective agreement not to acknowledge the stench, as if ignoring it gives you power over it. But the way people flinch when you enter a room, or cover their mouths with a sleeve, or tilt their heads slightly away as you pass, it tells you the truth. You reek. Not just of sweat or fear or mildew, but of something deeper. You smell like disease, like rot given form, like someone who's been too close to too many dead things for too long. Candles don't help. You've tried. You burned rosemary, cloves, lavender, anything you could scavenge. At one point, you crushed dried flowers into your pockets, hoping the scent might cling. All it did was blend with the rest into a nauseating cocktail. Floral decay layered over meat gone bad. Perfume, when you can find it, stings your skin and makes your nose bleed. The court ladies used to dab it behind their ears, on their wrists, at the base of their throats. Now there's no one left to impress and nothing left to hide behind. The scented oils sit untouched, gathering dust. You stop trying after a while. You just accept it. The palace smells like a battlefield no one fought on, like a slaughterhouse after a flood. Every hallway has its own signature stench. Damp stone, old blood, human waste, candle wax, spoiled food. You can tell where you are with your eyes closed. The chapel smells of mildew and incense and something metallic you don't want to name. The kitchens reek of grease turned sour and meat that melted instead of rotted. The great hall smells hollow, as if emptiness had a scent. You walk through them like a blind man, through familiar streets, led by the nose alone. Even the air feels thick now. You breathe shallowly without meaning to, your body trying to filter the filth through half-clenched teeth. You've begun holding your breath when you enter certain rooms. Not out of fear of infection anymore, that ship sailed long ago, but because you can't stand the memory each inhale drags with it. That smell by the west staircase? That was where the washerwoman died. The warm, almost sweet rot in the laundry room? That's where the last of the linens gave up, and so did the boy who folded them. The scent is a map now. You know exactly where the worst moments happened, and you can't avoid them. Worse than the smell itself is the way it lingers. You'll be walking through an empty hall and something will drift up. A whiff of bile or scorched hair or something that smells like teeth, and you'll gag, suddenly and violently. You look around half expecting to see a body. Sometimes there is one. Sometimes it's just your brain playing back a scent it hasn't finished processing. The plague has long fingers. It doesn't need a corpse to reach you anymore. Just a crack in the floorboards. A stain on the wall. A draft that brings the past forward, like a whisper. And it follows you into sleep. You dream of open pits and blackened mouths, of trying to wash your hands only to find them smeared with something that won't come off. You wake up gagging, mouthful of the same phantom taste. You've started sleeping sitting up, back to the wall, a cloth pressed to your nose. It doesn't help. The cloth smells worse. Everything does. You've forgotten what clean smells like, what fresh air feels like. Even if the plague left tomorrow, you don't think you'd notice. Not by scent, not anymore. This is who you are now. Not just a survivor, but a carrier. Not of disease, but of its aftertaste. You are what the court smells like when everything else has died. And it doesn't wash off. When the physicians failed and the nobles fled, all that remained was prayer. Or at least the version of it that survives when fear eats through reason. The chapel filled again. Not with hymns, but with wailing. People you'd never seen kneel before began clutching the altar rails and begging forgiveness for sins they couldn't even name. Servants, guards, scribes, all pressing their foreheads to cold stone as if proximity to a holy surface might save them. No one led these prayers. No one needed to. Panic is its own kind of religion. A friar took up residence in the centre aisle. You don't know his name. He never gave it. He walked in barefoot, ragged robes streaked with mud, and something darker. He carried a wooden whip, and every hour on the hour he lashed his back until the flesh split. You watched it happen. The sound was worse than the sight, each crack of wood against skin echoing down the marble corridor like a drumbeat. He shouted between blows, declaring the plague to be punishment for vanity, for pride, for silk dresses and painted cheeks. It might have been ridiculous if his back hadn't looked like raw meat. Others joined him. A small crowd of self-flagellants began marching through the palace, once a day, chanting and bleeding, their feet leaving rust-coloured footprints on the stone. They sang psalms in a low dirge-like tone, voices cracked and trembling. You heard one of them accuse a scullery maid of bringing the plague upon them all, because she once smiled at a nobleman. She denied it. The next morning, she was gone. You never saw her body, but you did see the blood on the floor outside her room. That felt like answer enough. Accusations became currency. A priest claimed the Queen's illness was the result of sorcery. Not disease, but a curse placed on her by jealous women, or, depending on the day, foreign infiltrators. He said her survival depended on rooting out the wicked. People listened. When logic dies, suspicion takes its place. Someone pointed at a mute boy who'd never spoken a word and called him a devil's spy. He was beaten so badly he couldn't walk, though he made no sound even then. You brought him water. He didn't drink it. He died the next morning, eyes wide, still silent. Eventually, someone accused you. You don't know who. It could have been anyone. A passing servant, a desperate survivor looking to redirect blame, or just someone who didn't like the way you moved through the halls. You found the marks scratched onto your door, in charcoal, a crude sigil, meant to ward off your supposed evil. For a moment, you were afraid. Then you laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing left to do. There's a strange freedom in being feared by people who are already dying. They can't hurt you worse than life already has. You tried to confess once, not out of guilt, but desperation. It seemed like the thing to do, a last ritual before the inevitable. You waited outside the chapel, where a single priest still sat, thin as a scarecrow, eyes sunken into his skull. When your turn came, he didn't even lift his head. He mumbled something about absolution and waved a hand weakly in your direction. You whispered a sin into the air anyway. He didn't respond. By the time the next person approached, he'd slid sideways off the bench. He never got up again. The relics are still there. The chalices, the robes, the fragments of saints' bones in silver cases, but they've lost whatever meaning they once held. People still light candles, but they don't pray with words anymore. They just sit, waiting. The chapel has become less of a sanctuary and more of a waiting room for the damned. Some go to sleep there and never wake up. Others sit and rock slowly, murmuring the Lord's Prayer under their breath. Not out of hope, but out of habit. You've started doing it too, though you can't remember why. The rhythm helps, even if the meaning doesn't. You watch the friar bleed. You watch people die on altars that were supposed to be sacred. You hear screams in the distance, followed by silence, and you no longer wonder what they meant. You think of all the sermons you were forced to sit through in your youth, the ones about mercy and justice and divine order, and you wonder if the priests actually believed a word of it. If they did, they're quiet about it now. Faith hasn't saved anyone here. Prayer hasn't stopped the bleeding. The crosses have splinters. The candles stink of tallow. The psalms sound like mourning songs now, and even those are going quiet. What remains isn't religion, it's ritual, empty, bitter and tired, just like everything else. You don't remember the last time you ate a real meal, not a scrap of crust or a stolen spoonful of gruel, but a full, warm, intentional meal. You think there was meat. You think there was bread that didn't crack your teeth, but the memory is fuzzy, like something someone told you about, rather than something you lived. You're not even sure when you stopped being hungry. Hunger has been replaced by something colder, an emptiness so deep it doesn't even grumble anymore. Your stomach has given up complaining. It simply waits in silence, same as the rest of you. The court musicians are dead. You didn't see them go, but one day the music just stopped. No lute in the evening, no harpsichord echoing down the corridors, no singers warming their voices before a banquet. The silence hit harder than expected. It's not just the lack of sound, it's what the absence represents. You used to roll your eyes at their performances. Now you'd give anything to hear someone butcher a madrigal again. Anything to remember what it felt like to be annoyed instead of numb. But there's no one left to play, and no one left to listen. The halls are so quiet now that even your own footsteps sound rude. You walk softer without meaning to. You breathe through your mouth. You flinch at your own cough. Doors are left ajar, rooms half cleaned, chairs knocked over and never righted again. Dust gathers undisturbed. Drapes hang motionless in windows that haven't been opened in weeks. Light filters in sometimes, soft, grey, directionless, but even that feels like an intrusion, like the sun has gotten too close to something it shouldn't see. You used to check on people. You used to knock softly on doors, call names in the dark, peek in on sleeping figures to see if they were still breathing. You don't anymore. The last few times you did, they weren't. One was a girl who'd shared your broom closet. She had freckles and used to hum while folding linens. When you found her, her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling like she'd seen something terrible just before the end. You closed the door and haven't opened it since. Another was a boy who'd helped you carry water once. He'd died curled up like a child, clutching a cloth bundle that might have been food, or a pet, or nothing at all. You didn't check. You didn't want to know. You stop asking questions. You stop counting the dead. You stop wondering when it will end, because the asking doesn't lead anywhere useful. Time slips sideways. You forget what day it is, whether it's morning or evening, whether it matters. You sleep when your body gives out and wake when it stirs, but neither feels much different. You start to speak less. The few words you do say are soft, simple, automatic. Careful. There. Don't. You forget the sound of your own voice when it's not whispering. There's a freedom in this kind of surrender, a terrible quiet relief. You no longer worry about survival in the active sense. No plans, no strategies. You're not trying to find food or avoid sickness. You've already done both, and neither rewarded you. Now you just exist. You do what needs doing. You move because stillness is worse. You breathe because your body hasn't yet figured out how to stop. You are, in the purest sense, a placeholder. Something that continues because it hasn't yet been instructed to quit. The hope you once carried, thin, ragged but stubborn, has unravelled entirely. It didn't break all at once. It wore down slowly, thread by thread, until you stopped noticing it was even there. You can't remember the last time you told yourself things might improve. You can't remember the last time you believed something. Now, the closest you get to hope is inertia. That dull forward motion, that low hum that says, keep going. Not because there's a reason to, but because the alternative is harder. You avoid the mirrors. Most are covered now anyway, but when you catch your reflection in a window, it startles you. Your skin is pale, your eyes sunken, your body hunched like something half evolved. You look like a ghost who hasn't realised they're dead. You've started to forget your face, the way you used to stand, the sound of your own laughter. You don't mourn the loss, it feels distant, like remembering someone you once knew who drifted away without saying goodbye. You wonder sometimes how long it will last, how long before the walls crumble, before the roof caves in, before the rats grow bold enough to claim the rooms, outright. But those thoughts come and go like clouds, present for a moment, then gone, leaving only the stillness behind. You don't pray anymore. You don't curse, you don't plead or shout. You just keep going, step by step, through empty rooms that remember more than you do, and somewhere beneath all that silence, something else is starting to forget. You wake up to silence, not the kind you've grown used to, the muffled quiet of people tiptoeing, of breath held behind locked doors, but something deeper, heavier. This silence has weight to it. It feels like the building itself is holding its breath. You sit up slowly, bones stiff back, aching from another night, spent on a mattress that should have been replaced weeks ago. You listen for the usual sounds, coughing down the hall, footsteps outside your door, the low groan of someone trying to move their body toward another meaningless task. Nothing comes. You call out once just to test it, a name though you don't even know whose. The sound dies in the air like it's been smothered. You wait a while longer, still nothing, no movement, no voices, no doors creaking or cloth rustling. Even the rats seem to have quieted. You pull yourself upright and step into the hallway, half expecting someone to pass by on some forgotten errand. But the corridor is empty, dust thick enough under your bare feet to record every step. A candle has melted into a puddle on the floor, long cold. A bowl of water sits where someone left it, rippling faintly, disturbed only by your breath. You start to walk, slowly at first, testing each doorway. Every room is the same, beds unmade, chairs askew, bowls and linens left behind, as if their owners had simply wandered off and forgotten to come back. In one chamber, the sheets are stained, and a single slipper lies in the corner. In another, a book lies open, half read, its pages curling. You don't see any bodies. That would almost be comforting. At least that would confirm an ending. What you see instead is absence. Rooms that feel recently emptied but not touched. It's like everyone evaporated. You keep walking. You check the kitchen's cold, the chapel, empty, the laundry room, silent except for the slow drip of water from a leak you can't find. You begin to speed up, heart thudding, though you don't know what you're hoping for. Someone, anyone, a shadow passing at the edge of your vision, a voice calling your name, but the halls remain still. The windows are grey with dust. The sconces are burned out. You stop calling out, not because you've accepted it, but because your throat has gone dry from trying. Eventually, you find yourself in the great hall. You don't remember walking there. The doors are half open, and the air inside is thick with the stale memory of once important meals. You step inside and feel smaller than ever before. The room swallows you. The long table, the high ceiling, the echo of your own footsteps. All of it feels like it's pressing down on you from all sides. You walk to the centre of the room and stop. The silence follows you in. You are completely, undeniably alone. The portraits on the walls are still watching. Monarchs with hard eyes and tighter mouths, painted in oil and ego. You used to glance at them during banquets, marvelling at how they seemed to loom over everything, eternal and unbothered. Now they seem like ghosts, not watching exactly, but waiting. You wonder if they're proud. If this was always the ending they imagined, a palace stripped of life, a throne presiding over nothing, a single servant standing in the ruin of their legacy. You think maybe it is. They outlasted their subjects. That's the only kind of immortality power ever promises. You sit on the floor, not because you're tired, though you are, always, but because standing suddenly feels wrong. Too formal, too hopeful. You lean back against a pillar and stare up at the chandelier, still draped with cobwebs from when the first cleaners stopped showing up. You wonder how long it will take before the roof caves in. Whether the world outside even remembers this place exists. Whether any of this mattered to begin with. And then, without warning, you start to cry. Not from sadness, not even from grief. It's something more mechanical than that, a reaction, like a cough or a cramp. Your body forgets what else to do and chooses tears because tears are movement. Because something inside you had to go somewhere. You cover your face with your hands, but no one is there to see. You cry until your chest aches, until the tears run dry, until you're just breathing again, quietly, in a room too large for one person to occupy. This is the moment you know it's over. Not because of a declaration, or a door slamming shut, or a final breath drawn by someone more important than you, but because you've searched and found nothing, because the hall is empty and you're still here, because your name will never be recorded, and yet you're the last one left to remember anyone else's, and there's no one left to remember you. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a triumph, not a tragedy, just the last quiet breath of a world that forgot to bring you with it. If you're still awake, thank you for wandering through the silence with me. History isn't just battles and crowns. It's the rooms that emptied without notice, the lives that ended without record, and the people who were left to sweep the floor when everyone else was gone. If you'd like early access to future stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a Patreon link in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment if there's a forgotten corner of the past you'd like to see covered next. Sleep well.